welcome to the next panel for 2000 AD at 45, the galaxy's greatest, where we're looking not at necessarily the last 45 years, but talking about the next 45 years. And I'm joined by the people who are in charge of that. We'll start off with CEO of Rebellion, Jason Kingsley.
Hello, everybody. Glad to be here. It's delightful to be able to speak to the fans. It's been a long journey, and it should be a long journey into the future as well, I hope.
We're also joined by CTO of Rebellion, Chris Kingsley.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm the younger brother.
By our head of books, comic books, film and TV.
Sounds about right, yeah.
Ben Smith. Hello. And by Tharg's minion himself, Matt Smith. Hi, Matt.
Hello, Warwick Fang.
So, like I said, we're talking about not just the past 45 years, but the next 45 years. I mean, it's been 5 years since the 40th anniversary in Hammersmith, where we kind of did this panel in a just a similar way, talking about what it means for 2000 AD to be at Rebellion, what the plans are, what our the ethos behind our comic book publishing is at Rebellion. Chris and Jason, I want to come to you first because this is familiar ground for us, but for anybody listening or watching who doesn't know the story of how you came to be the owners of 2000 AD, to effectively save 2000 AD. Do you want to just kind of quickly go over the mythology of this moment?
Yes, it is a bit of a mythology. It's becoming faded with time, it's maturing like a fine wine, the story. It all started when we were very interested in licensing Strontium Dog from 2000 AD catalog. We wanted to make a computer game, so I approached the team. We approached the team in London and had a vague conversation, but it was really sort of an unsatisfactory conversation. It wasn't really a no. It sort of was a no, but it wasn't a sort of no, we don't want to do that. It was almost we can't do that, which I thought was a sort of very odd way of putting it. Anyway, fast forward quite a few months, and I found out that, of course, 2000 AD wasn't owned by the company that was publishing it in England. It was owned by a Danish foundation. Now, for those of you that don't know, Danish foundations are sort of like charitable businesses. I don't think we have the equivalent in England or the States, but it's run on the basis it's for profit, but it's also for good causes, and it's called a foundation. And it's weird. Anyway, they had 2000 AD, but they didn't really know what to do with it. So, cut a long story short, we managed to negotiate acquiring it and sort of bringing ownership back into the islands of Albion, and where the ownership has remained ever since. And that was in the year 2000, which is quite useful. As I get older, as age kicks in, I'll be able to remember that, I hope. So yeah, I mean, I've summarized an incredibly long, convoluted story, which involved an awful lot of no's and an awful lot of, go away, stop bothering me. But we felt it was really important. I mean, both Chris and I have been huge fans of 2000 AD as readers from the very first issue. And I can remember buying it from a newsagent's next to a chip shop, which I used to get chips from on the way home from school. I can remember that, buying it in February 77. And I've been a huge fan ever since. And I just felt that it had sort of gone in a slightly odd direction. And I'm kind of pleased to know a little bit about why, because it was really on the kill. It was in the kill pen, if you like. It was being run as a business, as an ongoing business, but it wasn't being expanded. It wasn't being invested in. In fact, the exact opposite. It was sort of being sort of slowly allowed to wither, and that wasn't good for creative inspiration. It wasn't good for the editorial staff. It wasn't good for for creativity with all the freelancer writers and artists that we use, and it wasn't really good for the fans. So it's a fantastic opportunity. Good timing. People sometimes say luck plays a part, and of course luck always does play a part, but this was quite a lot of hard work from quite a lot of enthusiastic people, and here we are today, many years later. How weird.
Well, I was going to say that next year, in another year, Rebellion will have owned 2000 AD for half of its entire lifetime.
I find that kind of quite not baffling exactly, but a bit weird, because it doesn't seem like that, because it's just so full of energy as a comic book and as a world, and everybody's so enthusiastically working on it. It's great, and there's so many new opportunities as well, new forms of media that have come up in the time.
Chris, what was your recollection of the time? Was there any doubt about this process? I mean, Jason said it was long and convoluted. Was there any a moment when you kind of went?
Yeah. Well, there are always doubts. I mean, you sort of you start out with one idea, and then it kind of morphs into something else. But you're sort of like, could we really take over and run this business? Do we know what we're doing? Have we got any qualifications? And I guess we're a bit bull in a china shop. We thought, yeah, of course we can do something like this. Why not? Let's give it a go. And we managed to convince Egmont that it made sense. But yes, all sort of business deals, they can fall apart at a moment's notice for all sorts of obscure reasons. But luckily in this situation, there was enough momentum, I think, to get us over the line. For some people, what we see as an opportunity, other people is just like, I just want to get rid of this, or I'm not interested in it. I'm not saying that's the case with Egmont, but we presented them with a positive opportunity on how to sort of move forward with 2000 AD, and they seem happy with that, and the rest is history.
Well, I mean, let's talk about that history, because at that point, did you have a plan? Did you have an idea of a trajectory, or was it once we get this thing, then we'll find we'll work out what to do with it?
I would of course officially say yes. It was carefully crafted and thoroughly researched and analysed up the wazoo, and we knew exactly what was going to happen, and our plan unfolded to perfection. But the reality is, no, we felt it was a really good idea, and we knew there was a lot of value. And quite frankly, sometimes in life you've got to do things that make you happy and make you feel like you've done something good. And cultural heritage is a big thing for me. I feel that, especially what I have been told is called low culture, which as a description I absolutely hate, as opposed to high culture, which I think is things like theatre and opera and stuff. But comics and the equivalent sort of mass market stuff often just gets sort of dismissed as not important. And in many ways, I think it's more important, because it represents what real people really want to consume and what matters to them. And it's not done with any sense of legacy. There are an awful lot of people in high culture who are working towards their legacy and what they're leaving behind. And I think things like comics and books to a certain extent are all done because somebody wants to make that and wants to have people read it and be entertained by it without any sense of pretension.
What would you say has been your ethos as owners over almost half the life of the comic, and how do you feel that has differed from IPC, Fleetway, Egmont over the years?
Well, I'd like to think we're a lot less corporate. And all the horror stories of the things that editors were told to do or not to do in the past they're not things that we've gone and told Tharg and the other guys, the team, to do. It's been pretty much hands off and let the creative team be creative. That's always been our ethos. I think it's the same in games, really. It was, we want to make the most entertaining and fun things we can, because ultimately we're fans as well. And I think probably that's the difference between us and a lot of other people that run a lot of media companies, is a lot of people, they're just the suits. And, and Jason and I think probably will be seen dead in the suit, and that's about the only time.
Probably literally, yeah. We might actually, somebody might put us in a suit as an ironic statement when I'm put in a coffin and buried. But I think Chris is absolutely right. We're very, very hands off. Especially in the last few years where we've hardly seen anybody, but we see Matt walking up and down the office sometimes, putting posts where it's going to go out to various people and see him walking back with armfuls of what probably are artwork, although it's covered in brown paper usually, so it's all a secret, so we don't get to see it. And it's nice to empower, challenge, support, and empower the creative people that are out there. I mean, hopefully they appreciate it. And if they don't, please tell me quietly afterwards. But I know that I'm not an expert editor, and therefore I will give my opinion if I think it's needed. But broadly speaking, I just leave it alone and enjoy reading 2000 AD on a weekly basis, and the magazine and the collections. And increasingly, I'm actually enjoying reading the some of the treasury of British comics as well, some of the old stuff that I never encountered when it was first published. So there's the whole value for me is letting people do their best job they can.
Well, a perfect point to turn to Matt, who, correct me if I'm wrong, is now officially the longest serving Thargs minion in the history of 2000 AD. How old do you feel, Matt?
in Tharg years, about 800. But yes, in Earth years, yeah, I've been doing it just over 20 years now. I kind of became editor at the beginning of 2002. So yeah, there's a lot of progs under the bridge in that time.
Obviously, the last couple of years have been a challenge for everybody. As somebody who deals mostly in digital files that come in and get sent out, one would assume that would be slightly easier during the pandemic. And I guess, seeing 2000 AD coming out every week without interruption during an incredibly disruptive time, how much of a challenge was that to shift that production into people's homes rather than all sat together in the office?
I mean, it was a bit of a panic right at the very beginning when they first announced that lockdown was happening and offices would be closing. That was a real panic to get into the office and get what I needed, and also establish a remote connection, so that I could access all the server and all the files and the FTP and everything where people can upload artwork to. But once that settled down, then it's been fairly straightforward. As long as I can I've got access to email and I've got access to the server, then I can do it fairly easily. There's only a couple of artists that deliver physical artwork. So Simon Davis was hand delivering his Thistlebone pages to my front door, socially distanced, of course, fully masked up. And John Burns and Colin McNeil posting in their pages to my home. And then I could, the office was open, I could come in and bring the artwork in for it to be scanned. But one positive of the last 20 years has been the actual nuts and bolts of putting the prog together has got so much easier. Just being able to work digitally. You can put the prog together in a couple of days if you've got all the files all ready to go. So in that sense, it's a lot easier these days than it used to be. So
one thing I assume hasn't got any easier over that period is balance, and the kind of churn of stories and making sure that you're getting the right mix. Has it got easier for you over time? That have you developed a kind of a sixth sense for how things are going, how things are going to fit together, or is there always that slight element of panic?
Yeah, I mean, there's always something that's going to go wrong, and you have to have a backup plan. Certainly with a weekly, you're constantly looking at what's coming up, where artists are and writers in their schedules, and whether they're going to run out of time on something. So you have to be constantly on the ball about whether these things are on schedule. In which case, you do have to drop things back, bring things forward, drop in something, and constantly you get a kind of sixth sense for how long people are going to take to do something. So you kind of factor that in accordingly. But yeah, I mean, always I look at my schedule and see what the lineup is, and I try to get as much of an even balance as I can. I tried not to have too many similar creators or writers writing multiple stories running at the same time. Just to get a nice mix of styles and story types, just to make it a balanced prog.
I was going to ask what your ethos as an editor is, because 2080 is in a unique position in that it has this incredible legacy of characters and stories and creators. But also, I think you've mentioned before, it can't be a nostalgia product. It can't be something that only harks to the past. You talk a little bit about the challenge of maintaining that feel, that balance.
Yeah, I mean, it's slightly become harder as the years go by. When when we sort of lose creators like Carlos, who's a huge part of 2000 AD, and then suddenly Strontium Dog becomes a series that's no longer a possibility. I mean, we could run more Strontium Dog stories, but there is always the thought that maybe it would be best to leave it for a while. As time has gone on, some of the more classic stories that used to be sort of part of a regular lineup have drifted away somewhat, and I've sort of like tried to find new stories that would fill that balance. So yeah, I don't want 2000 to become purely a nostalgia title. I don't want it to be seen. We've seen other sort of comics that sort of harken back to the 70s. Sort of like these are the comics you read when you were 8. Let's get more of that. And I don't want 2000 to become that. I want it to be be a modern comic that's kind of like pushing forward. So I'm trying to find new stories and new creators that can give it a sense of a 21st century sensibility. We've also got a huge pool of characters that we don't want to sort of like just vanish into the mists of time. So there'll still be references to those. They'll still pop up every now and then. Just to keep the feel that this huge weight of history, in 45 years, we want to celebrate that past, but also look forward as well.
We're talking about the balance between the past and the future. I want to turn to Ben now, because of course since we did the 40th anniversary in London, we have completed the purchase of the old IPC archive. So now that's finally back under, well, quite literally one roof at the office in Oxford. And again, I want to ask you about balance. About we have the Treasury of British Comics, which is putting out reprints of things, but also we're doing specials, we're doing new titles. We've got Monster Fun, which launches next month, which is our first brand new comic as an ongoing title. Can you tell us a little bit from an overarching kind of publishing point of view, what it means to balance the past and the future?
I mean, opportunity. Weirdly enough, it sounds a strange way into that question, but the whole thing about 2000 is and the comics that we now have is that legacy that we're building on. That there's an extraordinary body of work that is proven and tested time and time again as having just such a sheer amazing quality to it all. That basically being able to build on top of that, throw new light onto the past, because I assumed naively when I started that we do you do one really good edition of a book, and then you'll keep that edition of the book in print forever as that's that. And in fact, what readers want, I came to discover, other people knew already, was that people want different lights thrown on the stuff that they already love. They want it to be kind of represented or curated or explained or indeed reissued in ways that suddenly clear up things that we hadn't cleared up before, or contextualize things in ways that we hadn't done before. And in fact, and that's not about simple nostalgia. That's more about the depth and love and interest there is in those works. And then for us, really, I think I said at the time at the 40th anniversary that it's really, nobody expected 2000 AD to save, to still be going originally, but to be the comic that saved the rest of British comics history, IPC and Fleetway's catalogue. And really, it's been, the last 5 years have been exploring all of that and seeing what parts of British comics history are important for the future, pulling out what will help build the future of British comics. I mean, that to me is the amazing thing about the non-2000 AD work is all of this extraordinary storytelling, artwork, and the rest that people have not had the opportunity to enjoy, to appreciate. That most of the books that Treasury puts out are stuff that that people haven't been talking about because they haven't had the opportunity to talk about it. They haven't got their eyes on it. And for us, that's really exciting, because then that's it's taking that stuff, putting it in front of people, and then commissioning new and interesting stories build off of that. So humor comics, and Monster Fun, exactly, people of a certain age will just assume the world is full of gag strips because the Beano's still going. But actually, the Beano does a very particular thing and does it very well. But it's very much and the whole kind of zaniness and craziness and laughter that was Buster and Whizzer and Chips and Crazy and all of these other things, kind of disappeared out of British comics entirely. And there's loads of exciting things to build off there. So I think commissioning new work that learns the lessons of the past and goes off into new and interesting places. Because I was going to say the next 45 years for me is all about all the new things. I mean, I find it fascinating that Matt, has so successfully had the comic predict the future. It's a decade ago that we did President Trump, and Al Ewing put that in there, and 2000 has predicted so much of what's coming that I think, and that's one of the reasons actually why I think Matt and Rebellion did so incredibly well when the pandemic started was, Matt had published The Day of Chaos in the prog, over a couple of years, and we'd thought about pandemics and apocalypses and what do you do and the rest of it. And Chris and Jason, I remember, early had a store of masks coming in to the office before anybody else was talking about respiratory-borne pathogens, and the fact that the very company is always thinking about the future, creatively and literally, allowed that moment when Matt suddenly had to flip from being in the office to being at home. Is that we were actually, thanks to Chris, in particular as Chief Technology Officer, able to switch the company over from 1 week to the next. Was remarkable, and but that kind of speaks to the forward-thinking nature that goes along with 2000 AD. That you can do it, and we had other contingency plans. Yeah, you probably remember that we had a whole emergency session, like what if the paper supply runs out? What if the power, what if the printing presses suffer such an outbreak that the presses can't roll? And we had a whole system in place ready to switch on where the entire readership would be able to go digital for however long it required, and happily and thankfully we didn't need to do that, but it's all about learning the lessons of the stories that we've told and then employing that to do new and different things in the future. That's kind of
Can I just interject here, because I agree. I think actually reading science fiction and sort of science fantasy and alt future things actually helps your brain cope with changes that are happening in the real world, and I think the sort of bad things that could happen, you can anticipate them because you read creative works, and I think it actually helps your brain deal with it in an interesting way. I mean, our current disasters in the world are awful, but they're not as awful as some of the disasters that 2000 AD has imagined. So in some ways, we feel, oh, okay, it's terrible, but at least it's not it's not the apocalypse wars. So yeah, I actually think the idea of fantasizing about the future helps you deal with real changes in the real world.
I think 2000 AD readers are better prepared for the future than pretty much anybody else because of that very thing.
I agree.
Well,
Yeah.
Matt, I mean, in a comic book known for its grittiness, its a little bit of black humor, cynicism. We've had lots of apocalypses and dystopias in 2000 AD. Can it get a little bit much when you're living through your own dystopia?
Yeah, I think it was I think Brendan McCarthy coined the term of 2000 AD being a post-atomic comic, which I loved, and ever since it started, it's been sort of created in the shadow of nuclear war. The apocalypse war was running in the early 80s when sort of like America and Russia were standing off, or the Soviet Union were standing off against one another. And all the thing about, I mean, so many stories like from this Dread or Strontium Dog have been set in a future that's seen nuclear war, and we're living in the aftermath of it. And then you've got a story like Meltdown Man, where a guy is thrown into the future because of a nuclear blast, and sort of like the whole comic is kind of with its mutants and robots and stuff like that. It's kind of existed in the shadow of a mushroom cloud. It's sort of like the future is kind of like is post nuclear, or so it's and then that kind of faded away a bit when Glasnost and sort of the Cold War kind of faded away. And now it's come back, and the comic feels horribly on point, more on point than I'd like it to be. When you've got the current Dread story where it's flashing back to the Apocalypse War and the Sovs are invading. It's weird how 2000 seems always seems to be kind of like current and pertinent and stuff like that, and through sheer strangeness of the way of the times. Really, it's constantly it's so current. I think it's partly because it's weekly, and partly because the creators are feeding on what's around them. It just feels like what we're putting out every week starts bringing in everything from around us, and it's the future is now. We're living through it, and 2000 is part of that.
I think it's really true, and I think Brink as well is a great one, because Brink, obviously humanity's up in habitats up in space, but they're all, it's a different experience to being in the pandemic, but we're all used to living in we got used to living in very small spaces and not being able to go out and enjoy the big wide world and the rest of it. And, and Brink had been, talking about that and the problems for humanity of that, let alone Elder Gods. But literally just, the shock of the world being not what you evolved for it to be. There are so many times that 2000 AD just is capturing the zeitgeist, or is running ahead of the zeitgeist. Is really just sometimes it's a few years ahead, sometimes it seems to be a few days ahead.
I mean that kind of goes back to John Wagner and Alan Grant sat on a carpet in their farmhouse reading the newspapers, and then by satirizing what they're reading, they're actually plucking at the sinews of those events, as opposed to just the surface level parody that you'd get from normal kind of satire. And those themes are sadly timeless. So so when things do come around again, it does seem disturbingly prescient. I mean, what I want to do is not necessarily dwell on the idea that we're all going to be fried to a crisp fairly soon, but to look more to a hopeful future. One thing it would be absolutely remiss of me not to talk about is the kind of wider licensing, exploitation, adaptation of 2000 AD. Because when we did the panel 5 years ago, Jason, you announced that you were opening up our galaxy of characters to potential licensed video games from other developers. And I wanted to get essentially an update on that, and to ask you guys about what, it's been a disruptive 2 years. What we're thinking about in the future?
Yeah, well, it's been super disruptive. I mean, we got quite a long way with developing a number of ideas for TV and film. And we even made one of our own feature films, Schools Out Forever, which is not a 2000 AD product, but is sort of in the vein of 2000 AD. It's a sort of set in a post-pandemic world, just before a real pandemic happened, which was extraordinarily surreal to be finishing off a fictional post-pandemic story and then to actually be entering a real world pandemic. That was just bizarre. But we are really picky with how we work and who we work with. We probably could have done a dozen or more 2000 AD TV shows if we just signed the deals that were offered to us by various people. But that would have meant we would lose any kind of control, we would lose a lot of ownership, royalties wouldn't flow back to creators and writers and artists, which they should do. And we don't, I'm always confronted by Hollywood assuming that they're more important than 2000 AD. And I always point out to them that they're not. I'm happy to work with them, but I'm not going to work for them. Neither's 2000 AD. And so the pandemic's just completely thrown a spanner in the works of all sorts of negotiations. Everybody's production lines are confused and conflated and conflicted. So it's a real mess. But we are making some progress. We are getting there slowly with some ideas. And hopefully there'll be some stuff coming out in the next year or so, but it's not going to be at any cost. It's not going to be, if we can't get the kind of structures of deals and the right creativity and the right stories told, we're not going to do them, because 2000 AD stands on its own. It's a perfectly valid, it's its own thing. It doesn't need TV to be successful. It doesn't need feature films. It will be great to have TV and feature films. But they've got to be done in the right way, and we've all got to help curate them. There've been a number of pitches which haven't gone anywhere back in the day, where somebody said, I've got this really good idea for Judge Dredd's story, and let me just summarize it. And they said, Judge Dredd throws his badge on his, on the desk and says, I quit. And he goes down to and sits in a coffee shop and has a cup of coffee. And then we explore how Judge Dredd finds his humanity. And I'm thinking, oh my God, you haven't actually read any of the comic at all, have you? And or how about this one, the pitch for Rogue Trooper, which went, this is from an well-known action star of, I really like the little blue guy that fights. Hang on. This is a pitch from an action star, quite well-known one, who said, I want to be the little blue guy that fights. And I was thinking, Sonic the Hedgehog? We don't have Sonic the Hedgehog. That's Sega. You'll have to talk to them about it. He said, no, the guy in blue with a naked chest and everything. And I was thinking, where the freaking hell is this pitch going? And it suddenly dawned on me, he was talking about Rogue Trooper. And I went, well, it's not exactly little. I don't quite know how that works, but anyway, so that's sort of where that didn't go anywhere, understandably, because he didn't understand the character, and he just sort of wanted to grab on to the components of the story no components of the story at all, just the character. And that happens. You'd be surprised how often that happens, that the pitches are so risibly poor that you just can't possibly work with the person.
Are you kind of acutely aware of the situation from the point of view of the fans? They see Marvel movies, they see DC movies, and they think, well, why can't we have 2000 AD movies, you know, because to them it's just we'll just get it done.
Well, absolutely. No, I can understand the frustration, because quite frankly, I'm a fan myself, and I've got a lot of frustration. I'm at front and center of the battle to get these things made, and I read stuff online, and I think it's not that simple, guys. What I don't want to do is give what we have to other people to screw up horribly. And that's really important to me. We're curators, you know. Technically we're owners, but you know, we're actually curators of 2000 AD for the future. I want 2000 AD. I want people to be talking about this interview in 50 years and wondering what was going on, thinking about it. I want researchers to be researching the decision making that went on and about why the characters were and all that kind of stuff. What I don't want is somebody who doesn't really care about a project taking it in a totally weird direction, and a direction that we don't think is right. I mean, Matt curates hugely successfully the stories, and you know, keeps them fresh and invigorated and sort of appropriate. And we've got to do the same in other media as well, and that's hugely important to me. And I really don't want to be blamed for putting shit product out in the marketplace. I don't want that as a legacy. I want it to be good, or at least I want us to think it was good, and other people may disagree, but I want it to be as good as it can be. And that means working with the best people, and it means working under conditions that we're comfortable with. You've got the most leverage in a negotiation when you've got something the other side doesn't want. So you've got the most leverage in a situation where you've got something the other side wants.
And it's not that lots of work isn't being done all the time. I think that's the frustrating thing, is that there's lots of things that we can't talk about and you know, and don't want to talk about until there's something material for people to latch onto and enjoy. And I certainly am conscious of how frustrating it can be, because we want them just as much as anybody else. Because we know that the stories that we want to see on any kind of screen, we know are so good already as comics. You know, the world-class comics, and we want to see a world-class adaptations of those. And that's just an awful lot of work, and also doing it in a way that is looking to the legacy and looking to the longevity of it is harder than simply, you know, banging it out.
Well, it's substantially harder because it's not the way that most of these places work. You know, you're working against their standard procedures, and you're saying, no, we can't do that. You know, as simple as thing as having Dredd not show his face, because that's part of the narrative, part of the story. Even, yeah, I had to have that written in. Luckily, with DNA in the recent movie, they absolutely agreed with me, and that wasn't challenging. I still made it written into the contract that would be the case, even though Carl and everybody else kind of wholeheartedly agreed. I felt that if it wasn't actually in the contract, there was always a possibility that some senior executive who didn't really understand Judge Dredd and would go, we can't have a movie and pay Carl Urban and not see Carl's face. And they'd have to reshoot a sequence where we get to see his face. And I was worried that might happen. There was no chance of it happening in the end, because it was the way it was filmed. But it was always, you know, a worst case scenario, and that would have been awful.
But I just also say, you know, there are other opportunities that come along, you know, and that's because of the quality of the comic. The fact of the matter is, you know, that one of the largest video games in the entire world, in Call of Duty, came knocking on our door last year, you know, to bring a Judge Dredd skin into that platform. And so, you know, there are, you know, constantly other kind of interesting, new and exciting things happening and going on that other people are inspired by 2000 AD and come along with an idea that we can kind of run with and make happen fast. And so, you know, it's there's constantly interesting opportunities coming up, so there'll be more and interesting things.
Yeah, what we can't do, we can't kind of micro announce we're having an interesting conversation with this person, because there's a fair chance it won't go anywhere, and we don't want to keep teasing the fans and saying, oh yeah, there's this. I mean, I've tried to be positive. You know, people will say, oh, this project's dead, and it's like, it's not, guys. It's still chugging along. And if you knew about projects, you would know there are plenty of movies that took 20 years to make. There are plenty of movies that took 10 years to make. So multiple years in pre-production is not unusual, in fact. But it seems that way to people that really want to see stuff. And imagine how frustrated they are, and then compare it to how frustrated we must be, and we're the ones trying to make the damn thing happen.
So, Megacity TV1 show confirmed for next year, then? Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's already filming. Not yeah.
How do we delete this file?
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of the things. It just goes to show the hunger and the enthusiasm that however it's expressed, that people do want to see these things. They want Carl Urban back. They want to see more Dread's World. They want to see this series. They want to see that series. Ultimately, TV and film are huge, great, big, validating aspects of our pop culture, really, aren't they now? So
they are, but also we've got to get it right. That's really important to me. It's got to be as right as we can get it, because we've got a legacy to the original creators. We've got a legacy to the people that launched. To Pat Mills and the team that launched the comic. I feel that it's got to be done right, and it's got to be done well. And that makes me an awkward person to deal with when Hollywood is not used to that kind of thing. What's great and empowering is seeing people's enthusiasm remain positive and get excited about it. So the fan feedback and reader feedback is very welcome and very exciting. But as sometimes, I can't say anything, A, because there isn't much to say, but B, because if I do say something, it can potentially get taken out of context.
What do you mean potentially?
Well, okay.
It's always taken out of context. Wait, having been chatting about film and TV and what for the past few minutes, and saying how important 2000 AD is the core of it, I want to come back to talking about 2000 AD and the future for 2000 AD. Matt, on a purely practical level, what's coming up? What's the next phase of 2000 AD going to be like?
It'll be much of what you've seen already. One of the questions I was asked when I first became editor was, what direction are you going to take 2000 in? And I always thought, well, there isn't really a direction you take it in. You commission the stories that you like, and hopefully they prove popular. So I try to keep the mix of action, comedy, sci-fi, fantasy, horror, and that's the sort of the mix that's done 2000 well for the last I
love how simple you make it sound, Matt. Literally, like we're entering our third decade of the second golden age, and you've made it sound your formula seems very, very, very neat, I think.
Well, as an editor commissions what he, as far as an editor commissions what he would like to read personally. So that's basically what I do in 2000 is would this be a story that I would have liked to have read when I was reading it, back in the 80s and 90s? If yes, then I'll commission it. So that's kind of like the thinking behind. But yeah. So coming up in the prog, we've got a couple of juicy Dread stories. A follow up to A Penitent Man, the story that Ken Niemand and Tom Foster did last year. That sort of carries on the character who may or may not be up to no good. And then Rob Williams and Patrick Goddard are doing a Dread story called Special Relationship, which sees a standoff between Mega City 1 and Britsit over the Atlantis rebuild. So yeah, those are a couple of Dread stories that are going to take us through the summer. And then Brink is a massive 24-parter, so that's going to be going on well into June. What else we got?
Can I ask, have you been enjoying the Regine comics, and where are they going? What's happening there?
Yeah, I mean they're good for trying out new things. A lot of times you get sort of creators come to you and say, or is there something I can write for 2000 AD? And often you think, oh yeah, do you fancy coming out with something new for Regened, because it's you can do a 10-page pilot episode and see how that goes down. So it's a good good sort of springboard for coming up with new ideas and trying out new people. So that's always interesting. So you always got new stories and new creators appearing in those. And yeah,
that's something I guess we should talk about, is the move to all ages comics. With Monster, we've had Regened, we've got Monster Fun coming out. There seems to be a very deliberate direction to go. Well, actually, 2000 AD is not going to survive without new readers. So are we rebuilding that old pipeline that used to exist?
Well, I mean, the future of 2000 AD has always been, basically, first and foremost, keeping the quality of the stories as high as Matt does, and then it's about building the readership, finding new readers, bringing old readers back on, and finding new generations of readers, and that's what it's been exceptionally good at, and the Regened is proving so popular, in terms of attracting new readers, in terms of giving people new ways into the comic, because it's easy to be a reader from Prog 3 and and take all of it as read. But in fact, and the vast majority of comments that we get, and I know there are some people who are maybe less happy with it than others, but the vast majority of the comments are fantastic. I've got something now that I can share with my grandchild, my son, my daughter, my kids, and the rest of it. And I even know from my own son's primary school, where I have had no influence whatsoever, their teacher is a huge 2000 AD reader, and has got the case files in with the classroom, and then brought the Regened books into the classroom as well, and people have come in from both directions. And now my son came home to report a conversation in the playground where two of his friends were going, "Oh, have you got to Rico yet?" And the rest of it. And so this stuff continues to inspire, and it's just about, I mean, Regened I think is really exciting because it's new. It tells good stories first and foremost, and then it's about giving new readers ways in to the catalogue, to all of the other great stories that they can go on to find. And will be nothing without new generations of readers. But that doesn't in any way, as I think Matt's shown time and time again, that doesn't mean sacrificing the past. That doesn't mean losing what we liked about what we had. It's about building it, and taking it forward and taking it further. That's what the next 45 years are, really. It should be more great stories and more people reading them.
Yeah, Matt, we've had a couple of breakout series from the Regened, the 4 Regened issues, Full Tilt Boogie, Pandora Perfect. I'm sure there's more on the way. What for you makes a breakout Regened story?
Partly the reaction from the readership. They're usually pretty almost unanimous in their positive feedback. So I usually listen to that, and also purely from a personal editorial standpoint, whether I really enjoy reading it and want to see more of it. I mean, Pandora Perfect I love, because I chuckle along reading the scripts, and think Brett Parsons' artwork is fantastic. So I'm happy to have as much of that in the prog as I like, purely to please my own selfish self-interest, in reading it. But yeah, I mean, Full Tilt Boogie again, is so full of sort of imagination and it's sort of like a sort of part of the universe we haven't sort of seen before. It's sort of slightly, it's something that the prog hadn't particularly have, slightly sort of manga influenced, but certainly sort of it feels very, very much something that a YA audience will plug into now. So that's kind of the reasoning behind some of these stories could sort of go further, is that I felt they got the legs to continue and the popularity to continue.
So we're just coming to the end of our time. I wanted to round off by basically trying to build a picture of what the next 12 months are going to be like. You know, we've been through 2 years of the pandemic. We're starting to recover. 2000 AD has thrived. Our subscription levels rocketed, funnily enough, when people were at home and relying on the post. But for each of you, what's the next 12 months going to be like? You know, what can people expect? Jason and Chris, let's start with you. What are your priorities for the next year?
Well, let 2000 AE and the team keep on doing brilliant work that they're doing, and you know, not interfere at all. You know, I love reading the comic still, and I'm thrilled. I read it digitally now because it's just more convenient. I used to get it delivered to the office. Ben used to bring it to my office for me on a regular basis. So I'm excited about about new stories and things, and I try to keep it real, as in I'm reading it at the same time as readers are reading it, because I kind of want to I don't want to get too far ahead or interrogate Matt as to what happens next in that story, because that would sort of change the dynamic for me as a lifelong reader. We will hopefully be doing a little, more development in other forms of media as well. There's some really brilliant new action figures that I'm excited by. I'd like to do more kind of merch like that, which is high quality and fun to see. I'm excited about what the broader publishing is doing as well. I read a lot of our novels, and there's some really great stuff coming up. And I'm excited about the launch of Monster Fun as well, because I'd forgotten about humor comics until the team brought them back, and I just thought they're really funny, making jokes about bananas and farting and stuff, and that takes me to a different part of my childhood, and it's a part that I'd forgotten about. So it's really nice that it's still going. It still amuses me in a slightly puerile way, but it's still quite funny, and I'm very excited about that, because that's the first new kind of all new comic that we've been launching for now, and hopefully, you never know, we might be doing more launches. There's nothing planned at the moment, but if things are successful, then we tend to sort of say, great, let's do more of it.
Chris, what about you? What are your priorities for the next?
I mean, what Jason says, but also, Monster Fun is personally a lot of interest for me because of the ages of my kids. So they're right in the right demographic, and bananas and farts definitely, but also making sure we get the 2000 app and digital availability to everyone, for as much of our material as we can, and improving that experience for people, because that's I could see that becoming ever more important. For people, it has been very important, but I think it will get more and more important, because after all, it's a much easier way for people around the world to consume their favorite comic on a regular basis and to dive back in. Gone are the days of Australia having to bundling up 4 weeks worth of the prog and then sending them out to people. It's great that the whole world can participate in real time with everyone else. That's important for me, and building that community of people who just love comics like we do.
Ben, what about you? Obviously, you've got fingers in multiple pies at Rebellion. What's the next year going to be like?
The next year is super busy. I mean, I'm excited on so many fronts. Starting new things up or picking things up like the Apex editions. Obviously, we did Zenith back in the day, but the Brian Bolland one, years in the making, and an incredible looking book. And then coming up with more in the Apex series is going to be fantastic. There are new. We haven't spoken. There are new and exciting things coming, inspired by 2000 AD, in comics form, which I don't want to talk about until we can talk about them. There's exciting licensing deals coming up. I'm excited about exhibitions and things that are happening that kind of celebrate the legacy as well. There's just one running at the moment in the Cartoon Museum. There's other things coming up. So those are all exciting. I love the fact that we got people probably don't realise Somebody's at my door. People don't realise that, you know, the apparel, the clothing, the stuff that we do direct, and the rest of it, and you know, and that people can now find, and indeed hundreds are selling every day at times. You know, all of those kind of things where we take the work that Matt does, the work that's been done in the past, and express it in other forms. It's just absolutely thrilling. And Mega City One TV is not the only project that we're working on in film and TV. There are other irons in fires that are very exciting that aren't going to be talked about until we've got something to talk about. But it's not all quiet on that front. And so, yeah, so and basically there's just an abundance of opportunity and not enough time, but we're trying to do as many good things, as many cool things as we can.
And finally, Matt, what's the next 12 months? Because was there anything more that you were going to let us know is happening?
Well, yeah. What's sort of exciting coming up later this year is this Undead event we got coming in September, Prog 2300, and the magazine that's out the same day. Yeah, that's starting to take shape. This alternate Judgment Day storyline. It's looking good. We've got a lot of good stories coming in, and I think it'll be a lot of fun. So that's shaping up quite nicely.
I mean that's quite a touchstone to refer back to.
Yeah, having said that, it's not all about nostalgia. We're looking forward. Yeah, we're also referring back to a story back from the but yes, it's going to be good fun. There's going to be a lot of things that readers won't have seen before, and some shocking developments that you won't want to miss.
Wonderful. Well, on that note, it's time to wrap things up. So thank you to you all for participating in this. Can't wait for the next 45 years. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks. Bye.
Great. Thanks. Cheers, guys.